Hello and welcome. This is Ask Dr. Callahan. I am Dale Callahan, and today we're hitting on the subject, excuse me, I'm putting things down, hitting on the subject of algebra, algebra and calculators. So we spend a lot of time. We're at Ask Dr. Callahan, and you can find us at AskDrCallahan.com. We provide homeschool, higher-end math solutions, college prep type material. So we spend a lot of time talking to customers, talking to people like you, talking about parents, which that's what we are. We're parents homeschooling. And so we struggle with a lot of the same questions. But I'm an engineering faculty. So I'm with the university. I'm faculty with School of Engineering at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And so I'm seeing things a little bit differently. As a matter of fact, that we spent a lot of time today talking about, as we bring in your students, homeschool students were mentioned specifically, as we bring in your students, things that we expect to see from them from the engineering side of the world as we bring them into the university. But one of the questions, we'll get to all that later, but because there's a lot of interesting stuff there about being prepared for the university. Matter of fact, some of the challenges that we see with students that are from homeschooled environments or a lot of the environments that aren't used to the college environment. What does it look like for them? We're going to be dealing with that later, and maybe how you can help prepare your son or daughter for the college experience that's gotten more intense over the years in terms of speed, in terms of activity, in terms of the way things happen. But today we want to hit the issue of calculators. These little demons here. The calculators that we think of in terms of when do we use them? Is it okay to use calculators? And specifically, the questions we oftentimes get is in algebra. So my students going into Algebra 1. So some of our courses, we have a video series based upon Harold Jacobs' Algebra that's carried by Master Books or New Leaf Publishing Group. And in the series by Jacobs Algebra that goes from algebra to geometry, and his students are moving from whatever they're doing into this series of algebra, but it really can be any algebra. Do I let my son or daughter use a calculator? So let me give you the short answer. Yes, let them use a calculator. There's a point in time that you move from a bicycle to a car because the bicycle was great to learn on, to do things, but you've got to move to the car to be functional in life until there's self-driving cars, but that's another issue. So when we're looking at the calculator, we want our students to be able to use them. As a matter of fact, one of the skill sets that you really need to be able to do when you're on the ACT and the SAT exam and moving into the university is you will be required to use this. So now as you're moving into algebra, it's time to start thinking about letting them do this. And I know what we're afraid of. We're afraid they won't be able to add 9 plus 9 in their head anymore. They'll have to do it on a calculator. That they want all those math tables and all that math memorization that you did, which, by the way, I don't think is valuable. But that's my point of view. That it's wasted because we'll now forget that. But you have to think on the bigger issue. What you were trying to do earlier is trying to teach them, what does it mean to add two numbers together? What does it mean when you multiply two numbers together? What does it mean when you divide? You're trying to think about that, and hopefully in whatever you use, you did it not only with numbers, but you did it with things, with money. And you probably did it with some spatial recognition in terms of understanding how that fits geometrically. That, so many blocks, so you think about square footage, so much times so much is square footage. If you didn't, that's fine. Algebra and geometry get to all that. But we are now moving past those skill sets that hopefully they've got and moved into and learning another skills. Algebra is what we would call an abstraction of math. It's taking the mathematics that we learned, the 1 plus 2 equals 1 plus 2 equals 3, and just basic what we call equations, where we say we're adding numbers, we're multiplying numbers, dividing numbers. And we're going to put them in what's called an abstraction, where we're saying 1 plus x equals 3. What's x? So we give it and that's what we would call that as an abstraction. So we're trying to get them to learn this, and in the learning abstractions, they start to learn to think, and they start to learn to analyze. And this is what we have literally seen with parents, and I get it, but this is put this in context. When I'm trying to teach them that, we're sitting there, some students are dividing by hand, it's a long division, 30 divided by 473, or 473 divided by 30, and they're doing it for the problem in algebra. Well, the problem in algebra is not trying to teach you long division. You already know long division. You now have this tool. Use the tool, because if you try to have your student do every single thing by hand mathematically, then you got a long time. You had better be a very patient teacher, because it's going to take them forever to get their assignments done, and your student is going to wear out on you, because you now are forcing everything by hand. You can wash clothes. You have a washing machine. You can ride the bike. You have a car. I'm thinking about somebody in the saw. If you're teaching a kid to use a saw, a hand saw, eventually you're not going to saw all those boards. You're going to graduate to a power saw that has power. That's what we're trying to do, is teach the next thing. This is the next thing. We want them to be comfortable with using the calculator. Are they going to add 9 plus 9? Probably, because I do still. You get in the rut, and you're just moving along and doing things and not thinking. But overall, that's not going to be an issue, because there's as you move into the math and the thinking, there's one thing about just crunching through a problem where you might just blindly add two numbers together. But there's when you start having to think about things, then this actually doesn't help anyway. And that's the beauty of what we're looking at here. When you're trying to do a lot of things in algebra, this is not going to be of any use to them at all. They have to think. As a matter of fact, the ACT and the SAT exam are written specifically so that if you're the person who just crunches numbers and uses a calculator or tries to manually do it by hand, you will never complete. You might complete the test because the time will run out. You're going to have an awful grade. What you have to do is learn to think. And so algebra, geometry, algebra 2 or trig, calculus, it's teaching you some new things, but it's teaching you how to think, critically solve the problem. So yes, let them use the calculator. In geometry, they will have to use the calculator some. Algebra 2 and trig, yeah, you're really going to have to start using a calculator. Calculus, well, you pretty much cannot do it without. So let's talk real quickly about calculators. And what did I do? So this calculator, I don't have too many with me. This is a TI-30. This is what we would call a basic scientific calculator. In algebra, this is what you want. Now, these are fairly inexpensive, and you can buy anything that's a scientific calculator. And when you go to the store or you buy them from a website, they're going to say, this is good for algebra and geometry and algebra 2 or trig, SAT. They use all these manufacturers say that on them. So the TI-30 is an example. We buy a lot of Texas Instruments things, but they're all basically the same animal. But it's also the same, device that if you look on your iPhone, you have, or your Android. I'm assuming Android does that. This is your calculator, and you see all the buttons. Well, I don't know if you can see them there, but if you turn your calculator sideways, it turns into a scientific calculator. And so this is basically the same thing as this that may be with you. Now, the difference is I don't think they let you use these on the ACT, in the exams and things like that, because obviously you can text message back and forth. This kind of calculator, though, a basic calculator, can get you through everything. I've seen students in engineering. This is all they use, and they're fine. But for algebra and geometry, this is what you want, and yes, you want them to use it. When you move to Algebra 2 and Trig and calculus, many students will move to a more powerful calculator that does things like graphing. There's a great tool. I'll put a link on Facebook about the tool Wolfram Alpha, which is an awesome free graphing utility for the web, but that's very powerful. And that will solve many of the problems that you need to do. But again, you cannot take your computer into the ACT or SAT exam. So what you want to do is you want to be able to teach them how to use the tools. So a lot of what we're doing here, yes, you want them to use it. Yes, you want them to be able to use this tool. And yes, when you're preparing for the ACT, SAT exam, you want to buy the calculator and use the calculator in math that they will be using on the exam. So they'll get used to how it functions, because some of these guys function a little bit differently in where the buttons are. So I hope that this is a common question. Can I use a calculator? Yes, you can. Not only can you, but we believe that you absolutely should move toward the calculator as you move into higher math. So hopefully that helps. If that's something you're struggling with, if not, let us know. Cassidy will be back here with you on Thursday. And in the next couple of weeks, we are going to be talking about because as we're beginning, there's two subjects that keep coming up to us. How do you prepare your kids for college? How do you start thinking about preparing them to the mindset and the skills they need to survive in college? And the second one that we're talking about is, as you move into this, is the fall rush. You may not have hit it yet. Boy, I hope you haven't hit it yet. But there's a fall rush that goes on that we all rush like mad trying to get school started. And then there's this burnout thing that happens really, really quickly. So we'll be talking about maybe before you get there. Hopefully you're not there yet, but we'll be talking about how do you deal with that in terms of at least the math component. Hopefully this helps you about the calculator thinking. So thanks for joining us. Talk to you next time.